Max Verstappen's title fight is now in serious danger after new evidence from Qatar exposed the most alarming performance collapse Red Bull has suffered all season. The data reveals Verstappen finished only 6th in sprint qualifying, almost half a second behind Oscar Piastri and beaten by his own teammate Yuki Tsunoda for the first time this year, which Red Bull admits is a major warning sign. The investigation shows the RB21 is suffering from violent bouncing, unpredictable balance swings and possible floor damage from a gravel strike at turn 4, which destroyed Verstappen's confidence in every fast section. Before we break down how this single day could reshape the championship, make sure you subscribe right now because Qatar is revealing problems Red Bull can no longer hide. Day 1 in Qatar delivered a devastating wake-up call for Max Verstappen as Red Bull's internal investigation confirmed the RB21 is operating with one of the smallest performance windows of the entire season. Verstappen ended sprint qualifying in 6th, almost half a second behind the pole time and just 9 thousandths slower than Yuki Tsunoda, who out-qualified him for the first time all year. The team described this as a structural issue rather than a one-session anomaly because Verstappen never found confidence in the car across any part of the lap. The biggest warning sign came from the severe bouncing Verstappen suffered throughout the lap. This was not aerodynamic porpoising but a mechanical problem linked to suspension stiffness, which prevented the car from absorbing Lusail's aggressive curbs and tiny high-speed undulations. Verstappen said the car was bouncing like an idiot, which made it impossible to stabilize the platform during corner entry. On a circuit built around long high-load corners, any vertical instability destroys the connection between driver and chassis, and Red Bull admitted they could not control it. Balance inconsistency added another dimension to the crisis. Verstappen reported aggressive understeer on corner entry, followed immediately by snap oversteer on exit. This behavior completely removes predictability and forces a driver to abandon natural rhythm. The internal data confirms that Verstappen had to correct the car mid-corner in places where he normally drives flat with total commitment. Each correction cost speed and eroded confidence, and the RB21 refused to provide the stability needed to build a competitive lap. The situation deteriorated further in the second qualifying segment when Verstappen ran wide at turn 4 and touched the gravel. Engineers believe this moment caused floor damage, altering how the car produced aerodynamic load. The telemetry recorded immediate disruption in the following corners, which suggests a localized loss of downforce. Under park firm rules, Red Bull cannot repair structural components before the sprint, so Verstappen is forced to continue with a compromised aero platform. The team acknowledged this is one of the most dangerous positions he has been in all season. Free practice 1 already hinted at the disaster to come. Verstappen finished 6th, more than half a second behind the leader, and spent much of the session complaining about strange steering behavior and lack of front-end response. Engineers attempted changes to anti-roll bars and ride height, but none of the modifications produced improvements. Christian Horner confirmed nothing worked, which means the RB21 is suffering from a deeper correlation problem on high-energy circuits. This leaves Verstappen with no functional setup path heading into the sprint. The championship context transforms this poor performance into a critical threat. Verstappen arrives in Qatar tied with Oscar Piastri at 366 points and 24 points behind Lando Norris. With Piastri starting sprint pole and Norris beginning from 3rd, Verstappen's 6th place start puts him at a severe disadvantage. Internal projections show that even small position losses in the sprint could reshape the final standings before the main race, and Red Bull now views the session as damage limitation rather than an opportunity to attack. The park firm regulations complete the picture of jeopardy. Red Bull cannot adjust setup without receiving a pit lane start for Sunday. That leaves the team with a difficult choice: keep Verstappen in a car he does not trust, or open park firm and attempt a full structural correction. The team is genuinely considering the latter because they know the RB21 in its current state may not be competitive in either the sprint or the main race. This level of uncertainty exposes how dramatic the decline has become heading into the final part of the championship. The central problem for Max Verstappen on day 1 in Qatar is that the RB21 failed to operate within a stable aerodynamic window at any point of the lap. The internal report makes clear that the car never settled in the long high-speed corners that define the Lusail layout. Verstappen required consistent front-end bite to build confidence through these sweeping sections, yet the RB21 provided only intermittent grip. Each time he tried to push, the front axle washed wide and forced him to lift, which cost valuable speed. This instability meant Verstappen began every lap already knowing the car would not allow him to extract its full potential. Another major issue arose from the mechanical bouncing that Verstappen described as uncontrollable. This behavior was triggered each time the chassis encountered curbs or minor surface imperfections. Instead of absorbing the vertical load, the suspension reacted sharply, which disrupted the airflow under the car and caused sudden movements at corner entry. Red Bull identified this as a mechanical issue within the suspension platform rather than an aerodynamic one. Such bouncing destroys the bond between driver and car because every oscillation forces hesitation. On a track that rewards total commitment, these movements prevented Verstappen from sustaining the aggressive cornering style he relies on. The imbalance between understeer on entry and snap oversteer on exit created the third pillar of the problem. Verstappen reported that he could not predict how the car would behave once he turned the wheel, which is one of the worst sensations a driver can face. The RB21 entered corners reluctantly and exited them unpredictably, making it impossible for him to build any rhythm. Red Bull's internal data confirms that these balance swings were not mild but significant enough to alter his entire rotation approach. When a driver must adapt his technique to manage instability rather than attack the corner, the lap time loss becomes unavoidable. The suspected floor damage produced an additional complication that amplified every other weakness. Verstappen ran wide at turn 4 during the second qualifying segment and brushed the gravel. The telemetry immediately detected aerodynamic inconsistency in the following corners, which strongly suggested harm to a critical section of the floor. Red Bull knows that the floor generates the majority of the car's downforce, and even minor damage disrupts the airflow that keeps the chassis stable. Because Park Firm prevents major repairs, the team had no way to restore aerodynamic balance before the sprint, leaving Verstappen with a compromised car for the rest of the day. Another significant problem is the RB21's inability to generate consistent front tire energy. The internal review noted that Verstappen struggled to maintain front grip through the longest corners, which required higher mid-corner speed than the chassis could support. When front tires fall below the ideal temperature range, the car responds sluggishly to steering input and forces the driver into exaggerated angles. Verstappen attempted to compensate with earlier rotation, but the car did not accept the technique. This mismatch between required tire behavior and actual performance reinforced every weakness in the balance. The failure of setup adjustments deepened the crisis further. Red Bull attempted changes to anti-roll bars, ride height and mechanical balance throughout practice, but the car did not respond. Engineers noted that every adjustment produced negligible improvement, which is a hallmark sign of reaching a setup ceiling. When a car cannot be tuned into its optimal range, the driver is left fighting symptoms instead of leveraging strengths. Verstappen's comments that nothing helped confirmed that the RB21 was operating outside any controllable window and forced the team into a purely defensive engineering approach for the rest of the weekend. Red Bull faced extreme engineering pressure from the moment free practice began because the RB21 delivered behavior that contradicted every expectation from the simulation tools. The internal notes reveal that the team anticipated a stable platform at Lusail due to the RB21's proven efficiency in long corners, but instead they confronted a chassis that reacted violently to even small steering inputs. Engineers quickly realized the problem was deeper than a simple setup mismatch. The aerodynamic balance shifted unpredictably at high speed, and this forced the engineering group to move from performance chasing to pure crisis control. The mechanical bouncing demanded immediate attention because it interfered with every aerodynamic process the car depends on. When the suspension fails to control vertical load, the airflow beneath the floor becomes chaotic and the car loses the stability required to hold a consistent line. The engineers attempted several mechanical adjustments to soften the vertical response, but none produced meaningful improvement. The bouncing was so disruptive that Verstappen could not maintain tire contact during corner approach, which left the engineers concerned about long-term structural wear. This created a technical emergency with no rapid solution because any major change would violate Park Firm regulations. The suspected damage to the floor after Verstappen's off-track moment created an even more urgent engineering challenge. The floor is the most sensitive aerodynamic component on the RB21, and even a small scrape can break airflow structures that generate downforce. The telemetry after turn 4 showed sudden losses in stability that aligned with floor disruption. Engineers know that without repairing the damaged area, the aerodynamic platform will remain asymmetric. Because Park Firm prevents replacing structural pieces, the team must accept a compromised car for the sprint. This is one of the most restrictive engineering situations Red Bull has faced all season. Steering inconsistencies added another difficult layer for the engineering team. Verstappen reported unusual steering weight changes in high-speed corners, which indicated that the front wing and suspension were receiving uneven load. Engineers attempted to adjust anti-roll bars and mechanical balance to restore predictability, but the RB21 ignored every alteration. When a car does not respond to changes, it signals a broader structural mismatch between setup philosophy and track demands. The engineers reached a point where they could not fine-tune the car because each adjustment either made no difference or created new unpredictable behaviors. Tire behavior further intensified the strain. The RB21 struggled to maintain consistent tire temperature throughout the lap and failed to hold the optimal window needed for sustained grip. Engineers observed that the rear tires overheated while the front tires under-generated energy during the longest corners. This imbalance meant the chassis had no stable base to build rotation from. At a circuit that relies heavily on tire stability, Red Bull found itself chasing a problem with no practical remedy because altering cambers or pressures would require steps far outside the allowed adjustments under park-firm conditions. Another significant source of pressure was the widening gap between predictive tools and on-track behavior. The RB21 should in theory perform strongly here because the circuit rewards aerodynamic efficiency and commitment. Instead, the car behaved like a machine without balance coherence. Engineers were forced to question whether the model is failing to capture specific high-speed surface characteristics unique to Lusail. This is damaging not only for this weekend but for long-term development because it means the simulation tools must be recalibrated. For a top team, this is a warning sign that the underlying design has hit a structural sensitivity exposed only at extreme circuits.